What's up, witches? Welcome to another episode of the BetterWitch podcast, presented by the Modern Witch Network. I'm your host, Allie, aka BronxWitch. I'm a tarot reader, Reiki healer, and owner of BronxWitch HeadQuarters, a conjure shop and witchy workshare space in the Bronx, New York. And I'm going to be coming to you every week with a new topic and perhaps a guest co-host to share our real life experiences and some of the things we've learned along the way as practicing witches. Because when we know better, we witch better. Today's co-host is Sophie St. Thomas. Sophie is an award-winning journalist and author based in New York City and originally from the U.S. Virgin Islands. Her bylines include Vice, Playboy, GQ, Glamour, Marie Claire, Pride, Cosmopolitan, High Times, Gawker, Harper's Bazaar, and more. She is the author of 5 books: Finding Your Higher Self, The Little Book of CBD for Self-Care, Sex Witch, Magical Spells for Love, Lust, and Self-Protection, as well as the upcoming Glamour Witch and Weed Witch. Previously, Sophie has worked as a columnist for Vice, producer for MTV Networks, and Refinery 29's sex staff writer. She is co-creator and author of The Intimacy Journal, a sex and cannabis logbook. You can find Sophie in the next issue of Allure as the magazine's resident astrologer and on Instagram and TikTok as the Bowie Cat. First of all, full disclosure, viewers and listeners, Sophie and I met a little while ago to have a chat, and then Mercury retrograde did its thing. She got into her chancletas and, stomped all over the recording. So now we're meeting again, and this time we're talking about sex magic and focusing in on that. And I'm personally actually really excited about that because unlike our previous chat where we focused on cannabis and magic, I feel like I'm very well versed on cannabis magic and just cannabis in general, not so much on sex magic. I can't say that I've ever done it or done it intentionally, certainly. And so for me, there's a lot of question marks and a lot of intrigue around it. And I imagine that, folks out there might have some similar questions or some similar intrigue. In terms of what it is, you describe sex magic as using the power of your orgasm, the energy that you raise naturally, sexually, and using it to manifest desires for yourself. And to me, that makes a lot of sense, working with energy and raising my own through drumming, dancing, chanting, or even like meditation and things like that. But I wonder about some of the areas of life where you feel like maybe sex magic could really be helpful. And someone who's maybe never done it before, what types of desires that a person might manifest do you find that sex magic is really good for?
I actually like it best for money.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was doing sex magic before I knew that it was like sex magic that I was doing. Mm-hmm. I was a lot younger and definitely, already had some sort of witchcraft practice, but it was just very, and it sounds, I know it makes me sound like, or please don't assume I'm a capitalist pig when I say this, but just like masturbating about money and getting what I want professionally kind of was very natural to me. Mm-hmm. Like it made sense. I was like, oh my God, all this energy. Like when I come, like I'm just going to think about like my book party. And this was back when the idea of having a book was still, I never thought it would happen. Wow. And so I would just do this time to time, like find myself masturbating, and, I would be thinking about sexual things throughout it as well. I talk about this in Sex Magic. see an issue with, just enjoying erotic thoughts or, materials and then thinking about your goal when you come. God, I could go off on so many tangents because I want to clarify also, if you have trouble orgasming, you can definitely still do sex magic, just any buildup of sexual energy.
Yeah.
But then I was talking to my friend, Kristen Soleil. She also goes by Kristen Corvette. She's the author of Witches, Sluts, and Feminists that came out, I think, in 2016. And she was just like, oh yeah, that's sex magic. Like, I did that on a full moon for my book deal. And then I started researching it. And I have to say, unfortunately, there is some kind of seedy stuff associated with the history of sex magic, mostly how people like Alysha Crowley, excuse me, I always want to say Crow because that's how they sing it in the songs, but it's Crowley did it. But I didn't know about that when I started it, so I like to teach and talk about it just from a very modern, we don't have to look at people who are not our forefathers' perspective.
Right.
And it's just using sexual energy towards a goal. It's just recognizing that sexual energy is energy and very powerful energy. And in the same way you might infuse hold and meditate, infusing a candle with a spell, or use the power of an incantation. It's using sexual energy to throw towards a goal. And of course, like with my candle example, you can integrate other forms of magic into it.
And I'm really glad that you mentioned two things. That you mentioned that being able to orgasm is not necessary to working sex magic, and that sex magic can be used to manifest any type of desire. It doesn't have to be related to sex or relationships. And that second one definitely strikes a chord with me because I have been married. My husband and I just celebrated our 10-year anniversary and been together. Thank you. Thank you. And we've been together for 15 years or something like that. And so I think I've always sort of looked at sex magic as like the thing for the hot young singles, to be doing, to bring in like the greatest partner, or to pair themselves up with maybe another practitioner that they also are in a relationship with in order to do some couple manifesting or things like that. And my husband's not a practitioner. So I have really sort of looked at sex magic as something that wasn't really for me. So I'm really glad to hear you say that. That gives me some hope as like an old married lady to be like, actually, maybe this type of magic could be helpful because I am a small business owner and growing a business, and there are lots of things that I want to see happen. That might be the way to do it.
You absolutely should. And some people dream of being an old married lady.
Yeah.
I in my 20s I didn't, but now that is definitely what I'm going for.
Yeah.
I'll keep you updated on that.
Please do. Please do.
But yeah, I for whatever reason like it. I don't have like an official magical definition or explanation of why. I've been told it can even work better for things non-sexual in nature. My intuition just tells me that, maybe, sometimes like some separation and a spell is nice. Like if you're having sex with someone and, maybe like, let's say I'm having sex with my boyfriend and I like want him to propose, and I'm like picturing that while we're having sex and he doesn't know, like, I don't know. It just gets kind of messy. If that makes sense. Like,
yeah. It feels almost manipulative, like, because is that other person really a part of this? Do they really want this? Or am I using the intense power of my sexual energy to like influence them, or,
Which is, I have to be honest that I think if you're, doing it for a reason that will better yourself or the world, you can't be too... I'm not too worried about people, being manipulative to their men in bed. Maybe like men even deserve that sometimes.
Right.
But I have been taught by maybe people who are more moral than I that masturbation is the way to do sex magic. Because then, it's like there's times, if groups of witches have historically gotten back together, or occultists, and had like an organized orgy for this purpose, and that is, you know, like collective sex magic. And if you're in a relationship with someone who also identifies as a witch or, you know, whatever, and you guys want to do it together, that's something else. But some people in the community look down upon doing it. If like let's say in my case, like I'm a witch, my partner is, you know, loves me and is supportive of me and my work, but it's not something he personally practices. Like, so some people say, you know, just masturbate. It's easier, but I think you're fine.
Yeah, I think I noticed that too. You know, both in your writings and talks and other people, that there seems to be a lot of emphasis on sex magic as a masturbatory act, and doing it with a partner or multiple partners is definitely an option. But I think there is a lot of emphasis out there to say, like, that's not necessary. You don't have to have a partner in order to work effective sex magic.
Yeah. And it just gives you more control over it. You know, you can do it like whenever you want, however you want. You can bring out like a penis-shaped candle if you want, and you don't have to tell your partner about it. Like it. So it's always nice to have alone time.
I was thinking a little bit about like the idea of doing sex magic through masturbation, and the idea of orgasming by yourself, and how powerful that is just on its own. Like, even if you're not trying to manifest something in particular, just how like special and beautiful and powerful it can be to please yourself physically, and know that you have that power, and that you don't need another person, you don't need anyone's validation, you don't need someone saying yes you're sexy or yes you deserve pleasure. All of these things, it's kind of like a circle. It's like you're receiving it from yourself and you're giving it to yourself, and it's like all kind of going around. And in a lot of ways, I think that might be really healing. So for folks out there who maybe have like trauma associated with orgasms, or have a difficult time having an orgasm and things like that, channeling it into something ritualistic, something spiritual, something special, something magical could also be a way to kind of maybe overcome or get through you know, trauma or painful experiences that you've had around sex.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, you know, I started out as a sex journalist primarily. You know, it was always, not always, but for the majority of my grown up life, practicing witchcraft. But I only kind of recently, over the past few years, started writing about it as well. Just my favorite, I also write about drugs, and my favorite drug research and Dr. Julie Holland writes about how our brains have a stash box, and they totally do. Like when you masturbate, just like the stuff that like the stuff that makes you feel like you're on cocaine just naturally comes out, and like feel like it works. So it's really is good for you and does make you feel better. I always, you know, I don't need my magic to have science, but when like there's scientific proof for some of like these healing traditions, it's very satisfying to me. And if you do have sexual trauma, like I definitely do, and it's so, even with someone I love and like want to marry, it's easier to come doing certain things by myself than it is with him, or like maybe any man. But by yourself, you know, you can explore different types of erotica, you know, like find maybe certain kinks and fantasies that turn you on that maybe you aren't ready to do with a partner or even talk to a partner about yet. You can play with different toys or ways of touching yourself, and really get to know your body. And then, you know, the better you know your body, the better you can tell your partner how you like to be touched. And so hopefully it means more orgasms in general, and, you know, hopefully more money too. Lord knows we could all use it in this economy. And
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I love I forget exactly what it was you were saying in the book, but you said, something like, I'm just looking forward to people just like going around just like squirting everywhere and like manifesting all over the place. But it really is like that release that happens, I
yeah,
think is very, very similar. I mean, it is exactly what we're doing when witches are talking about raising the cone of power, or shamans are raising energy in a drum circle, or any of these things. It's this idea of like harnessing all of this energy. And when we do that ourselves, there's a freedom there that maybe doesn't come up as easily when you're with someone else, even if it's someone that you're comfortable with. Because I think about that stash box and I'm like, I know what you're talking about,
yeah,
and I'm very comfortable in there, and I know what's in there, and it's the type of stuff that will like get me off or like get me excited. But I'll be honest, even after being with my husband for over a decade, there is stuff in the stash box that we are not talking about. And I would
I
not,
think that's okay.
yeah,
I
and I wouldn't be able to access those things with him, and so I would need to do them by myself. And like that's cool. Like, that's my
that's
reality.
that's totally cool. Like, especially for witches, I'm not saying like deceive your partner, but you're allowed to have like a woman's secrets, and I mean that
Mhm.
or a witch's secrets. Like
Mhm.
that's been that's what witches have done since the dawn of time.
Right.
There's just some you're allowed to have your own privacy, and yeah, you're allowed to have that you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it's personal, and it's okay for it to stay personal and be like a part of the whole experience for you. It doesn't have
Yeah,
to, even when you're with a partner, they don't necessarily have
yeah.
to be a part of what it is that you are doing. Um, so I am really glad to hear that, and I'm definitely hoping that all the viewers and the listeners really take that away from what you're saying, that you don't need a partner, you don't need to necessarily even be like good at orgasming, or have it come easy to you. And you can use it for multiple types of desires and things that you're trying to manifest. So now that we've maybe put people at ease a little bit and kind of introduce them to sex magic being something that we're all able to engage in, I'd love to have some idea of what this looks like in real life. I was doing some reading on sex magic, and read a couple of articles that kind of talked about like, if you have something you want to desire, how exactly might you do a sex magic spell from start to finish? Like, what does that look like? I saw someone mention that starting off with writing can be really helpful, so that you have a really clear idea of what it is you are trying to manifest. Because when you're in the middle of it, it might get a little foggy, like what you're trying to manifest. You might get caught up in the feeling. So it might be a good idea to like write it down and then get it started. But I was wondering for you, if you have something that you want to manifest and you're like, I'm going to do this with sex magic, how do you get started and actually go about that process?
Well, I always say how important visualization is.
Mm.
Like for instance, like an early sex magic spell I did. Like when I came, I would switch to this vision, down to the very last detail. I had envisioned how I would look at my first book launch party.
Mm.
Um, and I think having a very clear visual is important. One, because I think it's unrealistic that I'm gonna like think about my book launch party and become aroused and come just from that. I think I'm gonna want to think about
Yeah.
like my pervy, sexy
Yeah, I
thoughts.
was gonna say that. I was like, if I'm
Yeah,
visualizing myself, like, I don't
exactly,
know, like putting away lots of books on the shelves in my office, like how do I get horny off
exactly.
of that?
And so it's become familiar with it enough so when you do come and you want to like focus that energy, you can like very quickly, kind of without thought, just flip to that channel in your brain. But to back up what you were saying, to have that visual, you need to know what you want
Hmm.
first.
Hmm. Hmm.
And journaling is an excellent way to do that.
Okay.
Um, a lot of times when I teach people how to make sigils, which is a different, discussion, but I'll say, write down like a full page of paper about what you want, then like boil it down to one sentence, and we're going to use that to like create this. But for me, it would start with meditating upon what I really want and finding that visual. If you want to work with the moon, the full moon would be the best time, just because new moons are associated with beginnings and fresh starts, and actually that sounds like a great time too. But then as it goes through its cycle, the full moon is a time of manifestation, just like orgasms are a manifestation. So I think if you can do them at any time of the month.
Yeah, I like that approach, like getting the visual really clear for yourself first, so that you can think about whatever it is that you actually want to think about in terms of like getting aroused or that's sexy, and to build up that energy. And then because you have a clear vision already of what you want, when you get to the point where you're ready to orgasm, then you can switch to that and focus in on that as you orgasm. And I really like the idea actually of a sigil. I think that's genius, because I feel like if I'm thinking about something that maybe what I want, but it's not sexual, it might kind of like kill my motivation. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh my God, so sexy, so sexy. And then I'm like, book signing, and I'm like, oh, so if I turn my book signing into a sigil that represents my book signing, I can literally print it out and like stick it up on the corner of my bed while I'm masturbating, and then just have that vision, and then that that image, and that is probably not as distracting from my sexual fantasy as like maybe some other scenario. So I think that's really a genius idea, to turn your vision into a sigil, and then just put that in front of you, or like find a safe way to put it on your sex toy. Like maybe you can, especially if you're using a condom, maybe you could put it right underneath the condom on the sex toy or on the candle as you use it. I'm having so many ideas.
No, I knew someone with a penis who would carve his sigil into a candle and then come on that, and that would be how he anointed the candle, and then
right. And so it's not distracting, but it's there, like the visual's there, you know what you're doing this for. There's a higher purpose beyond just the physical orgasm. There's something else that I'm bringing into it, but it's like not it's not too distracting or takes away from like the experience.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, cool. You got that, guys? Take notes, okay? Because this is how we get it done. Okay, so now we know how we're getting started. We're visualizing, we're getting our idea clear, and we're using the orgasm to manifest the desire. The orgasm doesn't need to come from the thought of the desire. That can be whatever natural, whatever things naturally get you excited. But then when we're ready to come, when we're ready to orgasm, we turn our attention to that desire and let that energy, kind of like the wand, like the energy out of the wand, like that's when you're ready to release it and let it out into the atmosphere for it to come to be. When it comes to sex magic with partners, because when I think about sex magic with myself, well, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't assume. I was going to say sex magic with myself, I don't really have to worry about red flags or cautions, but that may not be the case. There could maybe be some things I want to keep in mind. You mentioned the condom on any item, like if we are inserting things, let's say, into ourselves in the process, whether it be the candle we're working with or a sex toy or something like that, covering it with a condom is a way to prevent, any foreign material or any mishaps or anything like that. Are there any other things that maybe I'm not thinking of in terms of sex magic that I might want to be careful of? Like, I'm just imagining myself like burning myself with some candle wax or like.
Oh yeah, be careful. I mean, you don't have to get too creative or weird. Like, I think that candle spell I did is pretty elaborate.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, please, by all means of interest, you do it, but you could also pretty much just masturbate and visualize, and make, you don't have to put a whole week and a penis candle into it. I guess the only, like, definitely don't feed someone your bodily fluids without their consent. That's kind of akin to sex magic. It's I mean, you know,
I hear about that a lot.
And I admit, like I grew up in the Caribbean. I know I'm very like white and pale, but I have a soft spot for those like Caribbean like voodoo women, you know, who would talk about putting menstrual blood in like the coffee of like their man. Like, I'm not gonna say anything bad about them, but as a sex educator, like, just don't, you know, you can give people things, so don't give anyone your bodily fluids without their consent. That's pretty much the only like big safety tip I would say. But then in terms of anything else I wanted to add is, I would say, as great as we talked about it, it's really great to have a specific goal in mind, especially in visualization, but just always remember to, you know, leave room for the universe to step in. You know, for instance, yes, like right now, someone would say my spell worked because I'm in a live-in partnership, like everything's good, but it's definitely not with the person I thought it would be, you know, like just like how when I eventually did have a book deal and a book party, like it was amazing, but it did not look like my early visualization. So just remember that, you know, the universe has its plans. There's like millions and millions of people, like just allow for a little wiggle room. And if I just wouldn't want someone to be like presented with, you know, their potential future spouse or like an amazing career idea, and turn it down because they're like, oh, this isn't exactly what I thought it would look like.
Right. Yeah. And we can do that because I've definitely had that happen. I have casted for something and I've had it pop off immediately and totally fuck it up and not be ready for it. Or be rejecting of it because it didn't look like what I thought it was supposed to look like. And then I'm like, oh shit, that was it. That was my thing. I was asking for it the whole time, and then I freaking ran away from it because it didn't look exactly like what I thought it was going to look like or what have you. So I definitely think that's good magic advice for sex magic, for magic in general. Like when we are manifesting something, be focused, be clear about what it is that you want, but also know that you might get exactly what you want in a slightly different box or in a different form, and let there be room for that. And I kind of think that sort of lines up a little bit with like sex health in general, because I find in my own life that like struggling to have orgasms and things like that usually comes from being too tightly wound. And being like, so like, it must be like this, and he must romance me like this, and there must be this many candles lit and roses on the floor. And if I don't have that, then I, you know, and like letting go a little bit can actually lead to something like amazing and wild and crazy weird that you didn't expect, but that is everything that you wanted.
Yeah, definitely. You just gotta keep your eyes open.
I do want to take just a quick second to just touch on what you said about the consent issue with like bodily fluids and things like that. I definitely hear quite a bit, I think, as people are getting more into witchcraft and becoming a little less afraid and a little less hesitant to talk about things. Like I feel like 20 years ago, when I was reading witchy books, at least the ones that I was reading, which were like very mainstream, very like bubblegum pop, like, you know, teen witchy type books, there was definitely no talk of like using even like your saliva in work. You know, there was not a lot of talk. Like, again, it could be just me, but like what I saw available and like out on the market, you really did not see a lot of witches talking about that. Now, were they doing it? For sure. But you didn't see a lot of people just outwardly being like, yeah, we work with blood, we work with semen, we work with saliva, I use my urine. Like feces has a purpose in magic. Like you didn't really see that. And I am starting to see people now be a little bit more comfortable with being honest about the power that those bodily fluids contain and working with it. And I am grateful for that because it's so helpful and it makes a big difference when you infuse those elements into your work. It does make a difference. But at the same time, now that information's out there, I think it's really easy for people to be like, ooh, let me put my blood in this thing, or, oh, you know, and it's like, okay, settle down.
I know. And sometimes I even wonder about the ethics of it and like me doing this. Cause it's just like earlier I was talking about like, yeah, you don't have to tell your partner everything that's going on in your head during sex. Like there's like witches' secrets, like there's witches' secrets. You know, the occult, you know, is supposed to refer to things that are hidden. So it's surreal to me. I'm right now working on a project where I'm really researching history in a way I haven't before, and how open we can be. Like even, this is silly, but I'm rewatching the X-Files right now, which was made in the mid 90s, but there was 2 episodes in a row. One was all like a satanic panic one. You know, I was like, oh cool, this is gonna be like the Satan-y one, but no, this was like Satan was real, the devil worshippers were real, they had to catch them. And then after that one, the same thing happened with witches. There was an X-File where, you know, Mulder and Scully are like, oh no, the witches and the sigils, like they're evil, we must put them in federal prison. And I'm like, wow, so much has changed.
Right.
You know, like this is crazy to me. But they were, Mulder and Scully are so fucking scared of a sigil.
I love it. They're out here like literally fighting Martians, and they're like, the witch drew a cross.
There's a sigil on a tree, and they're like trying to lock these people up for. It's crazy to me how much it has changed.
Yeah, but a lot of that comes from, I think, misunderstanding the things that happen. Like you imagine someone who already has probably a misconception about magic, a misconception about people who call themselves witches, the paranormal, supernatural, all of those things. And then they hear, you know, a couple of chicks talking about how they're going to put their period blood in somebody's cupcakes. Like, you know, now there's like, of course, now they're ready to like chase us out of town with like torches and stuff because they don't, you know, you hear something like that. And I think most people are like, that sounds horrifying. So I really appreciate that you talk.
Can I interject though?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think we're that bad. Like I just mean, some people, I thought this was a myth until it was confessed to me. Like some like non-witch women will, like, you know, if they're trying to get pregnant, like scoop a guy's cum off their belly and like put it up in them. And that's like kind of considered normal. But I always joke, I'm like, if I'm going to steal your cum, it's like so I can anoint a candle with it and like cast it. So exactly. Sometimes when people act like so scared and outraged by these witchy things, I quickly can find like the vanilla straight version of it. And it's most of the times it's scarier to me than what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, think of all the times
like stealthing, like, you know, like people stealth people and don't think it's anything. People take off a condom.
What does that mean? Oh, that has a word? That's what it's called? Stealthing? That's fucked up.
yet if you're having sex with it, it happened to me when I was younger before there was a word for it. If it's when you're having sex with a man using a condom and like say he's like hitting it from behind or something, but you can't see that he takes off the condom and continues to have sex with you. And men do things like that, and there wasn't even a word for it until like a few years ago. So
Right, because it was so like, it happens. They do
exactly. So
that.
when people are scared of like a little of like the fact that people have slipped period blood into coffee or like a red velvet cupcake,
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, I think, and I can understand your hesitance as an educator because it's like you never know how people are going to take information and where they're
yeah,
going to take it and what they're going to do with it. And you hope that people understand that there's a time and a place and like as you mentioned, an ethical way to go about doing these things, even if you are not telling your partner that you're doing them. I feel like
yeah,
there's an ethical way to keep it to yourself in a way. Like there's a way to keep it to yourself without doing it to bring harm to the other person or doing something that they would like maybe be upset about. Like I feel like if you keep it to yourself, but it's something that like if they knew they'd be okay with,
yeah,
is kind of like the line. If they knew about it and they'd be outraged, they'd be upset, they would feel violated, then you shouldn't be doing it. But
yeah.
if you feel like they would probably feel no way about it, you just know that their involvement is not going to add the right energy to what you're trying to do, then I feel like that's a situation where maybe keeping it to yourself is like okay, if that makes sense.
No,
In your intro, you touched on this and it really spoke to me. So I just want to share it with everybody else. There's a part in the intro of Sex Witch where Sophie says, a breakup delivers a massive blow to the ego and produces feelings of failure. However, not all romantic relationships are meant to last for your entire life. Some people come into our lives to teach us about ourselves and the world or to leave us with an experience. Through hard work and excluding cases of abuse, we can come to see our former lovers as gifts rather than failures that render us unlovable. And
that's a nice sentence.
yeah, thank you for sharing that and including that because I do think that we think of sex magic in terms of like getting into a relationship, finding one, or something that we do either in one or in spite of one. And I hadn't thought of sex magic as something that could maybe be a part of our breakups. And I was curious about using sex magic maybe to release relationships or release emotional ties to our previous partners and things like that. Now, have you ever used sex magic for that, or do you think that sex magic could be used for that reason? Maybe not with the partner, maybe on your
Oh,
own to
yeah,
like
I did it once with a
release.
partner, I admit.
Yeah,
More, well, it sounds very evil Scorpio, but we weren't married.
yeah.
It was like
You're just like, go away, go away.
no, it was actually very sad, but I just knew logistically that it wasn't going to work out. But when I knew that, even though I knew that we were definitely going to be breaking up soon, I made sure to like fuck his brains out every single time we had sex so that when we broke up, he would be haunted by memories of me.
Gotcha.
But I absolutely think it's normal to have more than one love in a lifetime. At the risk of insulting anyone, in fact, like having only one love of your life seems kind of boring. I haven't even gotten married yet, and I've definitely had more than one loves. And yeah, once I was wearing, God, my friend Melissa just like totally changed my viewpoint with a really funny sentence once. I had an ex who had money and he bought me a pair of those like red bottom shoes, you
Oh,
know?
how
Yeah.
nice.
And I was like lamenting it to her. I was like, oh, I love my like the buttons, but they remind me of like so and so. I can never wear them. She like almost slapped me and she was like, those are red bottoms a former lover gave you. Like, why are you
Yeah.
making it all like she just said it in like such a pretty way. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess they were a gift from a former lover. That's really beautiful. Why am I like not wearing these shoes all the time? But one more story. One of my most powerful sex magic experiences was after a breakup. It was the first time I squirted, which was really cool. But I did, like, a partner moved out. I was glad that they moved out. And I, cleansed my whole apartment, did like a magical clearing thing, and then kind of like masturbate to celebrate it. And it was really transformative. So yeah, I think that's probably one of the most powerful times to do that. You're probably, that was the mode I was in when I wrote Sex Witch, is that post breakup state. You're so free. There's so much passion still, though, you're healing, and there is a lot of, inspiration and pain, as if that's okay to say, and in my experience.
Yeah, because I think that, pain is just another one of those emotions that can build so much energy for us. Like, I think of just the magic that I've casted, some of the most hard hitting, fast hitting have been the ones where I've been just like crying my eyes out in the middle of it, and it's been so sad and it's been so hard to deal with, but all of that energy, that's exactly what it is. It's all energy, and like it's coming out of my face in tears, but in another circumstance maybe it's coming out of my vagina as cum, and like it's all kind of similar, in the sense that it's energy that I have built up inside of myself that my body is literally letting go for me, and putting, out there, and I can use that to my benefit rather than having it just be this biological thing that's happening. I can attach it to an intention and let it like accomplish something for me. So my husband and I are very different sexually. I'm definitely like the free exploratory one, and he is not. And a lot of that changed for me in our relationship. You try to match your partner, I think, over time, and I feel like I kind of lost myself sexually, and a lot of that adventurous spirit went away because I was like, well, why be like this? Like, I'm not going to get to live these fantasies or do these things, so why be interested? And I kind of just stopped being open to my own sexual satisfaction, and stopped even thinking of it as a priority anymore, because it just seemed like something I would never get. And so I'm really starting to think about like how sex magic could maybe help me to find that again and reclaim my own excitement about sex,
Yeah. I really, just with all my heart, believe that people, yes, of course, you partner up with someone, we all make compromises, but I just so strongly believe that people deserve to live their, sexual truth in life. Even if you were not raised in a conservative or a Christian household, there's just so much sex negativity that we grew up with. I'm a millennial, that, it seems a little bit better now. Like, it shouldn't be wild to say, but people should 100% be able to die feeling as if they have done everything they want to, as long as it's consensual. Sex is such a part of life. We only have these bodies for so often. We have erogenous zones and orgasms for a reason. Just, nature knows there's nothing wrong with sex and with sex for pleasure. So it's kind of a shame that society likes to tell otherwise. I just think it's just another way to control people, especially women, personally. But
no, I agree. I think that's very obvious, that the like Puritan values, have are really just about control and limiting people and limiting their freedom. And when you rebel against that, you are often like kind of looked at as weird or strange or what have you. But it's incredibly empowering to free yourself and say, like, this is what turns me on, this is what gets me excited, and like it might be different from what's okay, but
I just don't want no one to ever feel like they like missed their chance, because I really don't believe in that.
Yeah, I love that too, because I know a a lot of my followers and stuff are folks who are older than I am. I'm in my
Yeah.
mid 30s.
Yeah.
But I think that that's an important thing to remind folks that, like, if you are in your 50s, 60s, if you are on your second marriage, if you've never been married, if you have no desires to do so, like all of these you talk about in your book, if you don't fall into like the heteronormative framework, if you are interested in same-sex relationships or trans relationships or poly relationships, like all of these different configurations are still supported by sex magic, because you're really just focusing in on a type of energy that everyone has access to, even if you feel like you're not being very sexual, or if you're not having like traditional sexual experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's really an important thing to remind people of, and a good place for us to probably kind of stop on that end. One quick thing that I did want to mention, just because both you and I are canna witches, we're cannabis enjoyers, and when we talk about sex, for whatever reason, I feel like drugs or intoxicants tend to come up in the conversation. People kind of lump them together and things like that. And personally, I feel like cannabis tends to make me horny. It tends to make me want to have sex. I feel like alcohol does something similar. It lowers the inhibitions and makes me more open and more free. But I can also see why people sometimes get a little bit nervous about talking about sex and intoxicants together, because of maybe some of the concerns of abuse or things like that. How do you feel about folks incorporating things like cannabis, alcohol, perhaps maybe even other drugs into their sex magic experiences? Yay or nay? Or in the middle?
It totally depends. I want to start by saying, I'm also a drug writer. The book I was on anyways, you'll hear about Witch at some point, but science is finally, telling people the truth about drugs, and like it's looking like MDMA is going to be cleared by 2023 for treatment for PTSD in vets, and just we're in a really exciting time when it comes to mind altering substance, and for the first time people are kind of looking around and saying, hey, maybe smoking weed or even MDMA once in a while isn't all that bad or different than like drinking all the time. And personally, I see indulging in substances as totally natural and something to be enjoyed, unless they start to cause harm for you or your loved ones. I don't drink. I quit drinking 10 years ago because my family has a history of alcoholism, and I saw it like going there. I was just like, no.
I know that feeling.
But I do find with cannabis, in fact, the reason I got into cannabis was after my psychiatrist pointed me in that direction for some PTSD nightmares I was having. But my partner has a glass of wine or two a night, and he's totally, totally fine, but he just cannot handle his shit on weed. And it is so funny. but we work together, and, in that instance, I would say it's fine because we both know each other. If I can tell if he's like drunk instead of tipsy, and, we have kind of open lines of communication. So if you're in a long-term partnership, I think it's really unrealistic to say, no, never have stone sex or like tipsy sex, because it's just going to happen. If you're dating and it's with someone new, I think it's important to disclose if you have taken substances. I have heard a few bad stories of someone taking shrooms before, say, like a kink scene, and then end up having a bad time or not feeling like they could speak up as a result of their trip, and the person in the scene with them just had no idea they were even on it, and you don't want to put someone in that position. So I would say just always err on the side of safety. A lot of that relies in being honest with yourself about your relationship to substances, because like anything, they're great, but they can definitely be abused. but I would just really, really stress communication. And unless you have, just like a crazy long-term relationship with like blanket consent where you've seen everything they've done that night, make sure you're always disclosing to your partners and asking them of the same, because you don't want to ever be on the receiving end of realizing that you've hooked up with someone who was overly intoxicated. That's just the worst.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I wanted to touch on that because I do feel like, not that the two go hand in hand, but I feel like they often come up in similar conversations.
Of course. I mean, both, just cannabis and alcohol are, great date ideas, a great way to hang out, especially if you're, dating or just trying to relax and unwind. I think it's natural that they lead to sex, and not so much alcohol, but for cannabis and other psychedelics really, really enhance the senses. They can also totally kill boners. So it's just, I'm all over the place with this just because there's so many factors that go into it.
Yeah. But I think that like the general idea is that if you enjoy or you see a place for some type of substance in your sexual experience, that's fine. That could add to the magic, that could add to the experience. But if you're sharing it with someone else, and at the very least, they should be aware that you are taking something, whether you directly told them or they were with you while you were doing it so they know or whatever, but being honest that there's like a substance involved to heighten the experience for both of you, it's probably in good form to at least let the other person know. It's an extra good form to share it with them, especially if it's weed.
Yes, definitely.
Don't be stingy. Make sure to share. That'd be the worst. You like get over to like someone's house for a little like late night booty call, and they like smoked without you, and you're like, "Are you serious? You didn't wait 10 minutes for me to get here?"
Some drugs, like God, I did cocaine some when I was younger. I had to quit that too because it just like was nasty for me. But some drugs, people sneak in the bathroom like to do a line and not tell anyone because you don't want to share. But like, if someone hogged weed and didn't offer you weed, do not fuck them because they are a sociopath.
Right, I'd be like, excuse me.
That's not the way it works.
No sex magic for you.
No sex magic. Cannabis is such a communal drug. I love that about it.
I love what you just said about the cocaine reminded me of this hilarious clip I saw. You may have seen it, and I don't know the characters in it. I think there are two characters from the drag race show. Okay.
Yes.
They're sitting at a table and they're with like an etiquette coach, like a dinner etiquette coach, and she's like, it's two drag queens and the etiquette coach, and the etiquette coach is like, if you need to go to the restroom in the middle of dinner, then you are to say, excuse me, I need to go and powder my nose. And then you remove yourself from the table. And one of the drag queens goes, but if we went half on the bag, shouldn't I be going with her? And I lost it. I died. It was so fucking funny. The face of the etiquette coach was like, she was so disappointed, but it was so fucking funny. And I was like, yeah, good point. Bitch, if we went half on the bag and you got up talking about, excuse me, while I powder my nose and you left me at the table, we're fighting in the hallway.
I love that. God bless drag queens.
Always keeping it real. She's like, but if we went half on the bag, wouldn't I go with her? Yes. Yes, you would. That was great. The cocaine stories.
No, that was worth it.
Yeah.
Thank you enough for having me again. I'm glad we got another hang session out of this.
Yes, me too. Real quick before we wrap up, please do tell the folks where they can find you. They've already heard your bio, so they know about all the great things that you're doing, some of the upcoming projects and things like that. But where should folks look for you if they would like to continue this conversation or hear more?
Yeah, just follow me on Instagram or Twitter or TikTok, which I'm gradually forcing myself to learn at the demands of my publishers. My handle is at the Bowie Cat. That is named after David Bowie and my love for cats. And chose it in college and it has not changed. And,
I support it.
Yeah, I have links to everything on, in my link tree, which you can find on my social media profiles.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge. I definitely feel after this conversation, everyone has been armed with all the info that they need to be better sex witches. So, everyone get out there and have your safe, consensual, potentially all by yourself sex magic experiences. And thank you so much for tuning into this episode of The Better Witch. Bye. Thank you, witches, for tuning in to another episode of the Better Witch podcast, presented by the Modern Witch Network. New episodes air every week. Watch this video broadcast on YouTube every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, or listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast platform every Thursday. And if you're a BronxWitch Coven member, join us right after each YouTube broadcast for a live Q&A about the episode. Whether you're watching on YouTube or tuning in on your favorite podcast platform, we want to know your thoughts on today's episode. So please make sure to leave reviews and drop comments wherever you are. You can show support for this podcast by grabbing some sweet merch over on the BronxWitch YouTube channel and join the Coven for behind-the-scenes footage from today's episode and details on those live Q&As. I'll see you next week. Blessed be.